I hadn't planned on staying long that evening. My friend's mother had been after me for weeks to come by their neighborhood book club, saying it would do me some good to sit with people who actually still enjoy reading. I laughed it off at first. I was 24, most of my friends were more interested in screens than paperbacks. But that night, with nothing better to do, I finally accepted. The living room I walked into felt alive, like it had been waiting for me. The faint scent of brewed tea and something sweet from the oven hung in the air. Conversations overlapped, voices warm and familiar with each other. I recognized a few neighbors, but most of them were older, their attention buried in half-finished debates about the book of the month. And then I noticed them. 3 women, all seated close to each other on the couch, their posture graceful yet relaxed, as if they belonged at the center of the room without ever needing to demand it. They were older, early 40s, maybe mid, but there was something magnetic in the way they carried themselves. One had dark hair pinned up neatly, her eyes sharp and watchful. Another wore a loose sweater, her laughter rich and unguarded, spilling into the room with ease. The last was quieter, but when she looked at someone, she seemed to see straight through them, as though she was listening beneath the words. I told myself not to stare, but I kept catching myself glancing in their direction. It wasn't just that they were beautiful, though they were in a way that felt seasoned and sure of itself. It was that their presence shifted the air. When one of them spoke, others leaned in. When they laughed, it rippled outward, drawing people closer. At some point, one of them noticed me standing by the doorway, unsure of where to settle. She smiled, just a small curve of her lips, and patted the empty armchair near them. "You're new," she said, her voice smooth. Not a question but a welcome. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. "First time here. I hope I'm not interrupting." "You're not," another woman chimed in, handing me a plate of cookies. When our fingers brushed, it was nothing more than an accident. But I felt it anyway, that brief warmth. I took the seat, and for the first time that night, I didn't feel like an outsider. As the discussion went on, I noticed how often their eyes flicked toward me. Not in an intimidating way, but as if they were measuring me, curious about what I might add. And each time I offered a thought, even a clumsy one, they listened. Really listened. By the time the evening drew to a close, I couldn't shake the feeling that the invitation had been more than casual, that I had walked into something far larger than a simple book club. Something was unfolding, though I didn't yet know what. The meeting wound down slowly, like a candle burning at its last edges. People stood, gathering coats and scarves, voices softening into goodbyes. Chairs scraped against the wooden floor, and the living room that had felt crowded just moments before began to empty. I stayed seated, half rising once or twice, telling myself I should leave too. But something in the air made me linger. Maybe it was the warmth of the lamp glow, or maybe it was the way the 3 women remained in their seats, quiet but watchful, as though they were waiting for the room to clear. One by one, the other guests disappeared into the night. The door clicked shut behind the last neighbor, and for the first time, silence spread across the house. Only the faint tick of the clock on the wall and the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen remained. I turned to thank my host for the evening, but before I could speak, the woman with the dark pinned hair leaned forward slightly, her elbows resting on her knees. "You don't have to rush," she said, her eyes catching mine with a steadiness that unsettled me in the gentlest way. The woman in the loose sweater chuckled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's still early, isn't it?" she asked. "Stay a little while longer. We were just about to make another pot of tea." I hesitated, glancing toward the door like I needed to remind myself I could leave at any moment. But the truth was I didn't want to. My chest felt oddly light, like I'd been singled out for something secret, and my feet sank back into the carpet as I lowered myself again. Chairs were shifted closer, almost without a word. The 3 of them closed the distance between us, drawing a smaller circle out of the larger one that had just dissolved. The shift was subtle, but I felt it, The conversation was no longer meant for the whole club. It was just for us. The woman who had spoken least during the evening, the one with the calm, searching eyes, reached for the teapot on the tray. As she poured, the steam curled upward, and the faint scent of jasmine filled the air. She handed me a cup, her fingers brushing mine, lingering longer than before. I felt the warmth through the porcelain, but also through her touch, like she'd left part of herself behind. The lighting seemed softer now, as though the lamps themselves had dimmed in agreement with the mood. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, their branches brushing against the windows. Inside, though, everything felt still, suspended. I sipped the tea, the heat sliding down my throat, and realized how close they were sitting. Their knees almost touched mine, their voices lowered, and each word seemed heavier, more deliberate, like secrets only whispered when the rest of the world had gone home. In that moment, I knew. The night had shifted into something unexpected. The book club had ended, but my evening with them had only just begun. At first, we tried to hold on to the remnants of the book discussion, almost out of habit. One of them asked what I thought of the protagonist's choices, and I stumbled through an answer, though it was hard to focus on any character that lived only on the page. Sitting in that circle, with the three of them watching me so closely, I felt like the real story was beginning right there in that room. It didn't take long before the talk of books slipped into something else, something more real. The woman with the sharp, dark eyes leaned back against the couch, a faint smile curving her lips. "It's funny," she said, "how stories and books make us braver. They make us admit things we might not say otherwise." Her words lingered. The woman in the sweater laughed softly, but there was a catch in it, a weight underneath. "Like how I always thought I'd travel by now," she said, folding her hands in her lap. "Paris, Rome, maybe even just New York. I used to picture myself walking down those streets, but somehow," she trailed off, shaking her head, "life decided otherwise." The quietest of the three, the one who poured my tea earlier, reached out and placed her hand over her friend's. "You still could," she whispered, her touch gentle, reassuring. Then she looked at me, her gaze steady, almost searching. "Do you ever feel like you've already missed something, even though you're young?" Her question caught me off guard. For a moment, I felt the weight of my own unfinished dreams pressing against my chest. I admitted, almost shyly, that I often felt like I was racing against time, even though everyone told me I had plenty of it. "Sometimes," I said, my voice low, "I feel like I'm standing on the edge of my own life, waiting for something to start, and I don't know what that something is." The room fell quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. Rain had begun outside, tapping lightly against the window, a rhythm steady enough to soften the heaviness in the air. "That's exactly it," the woman with the sweater murmured. "Waiting. I know that feeling too well." Her eyes glistened, though she smiled as if to push it away. The woman with the sharp eyes leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her gaze fixed on me. "Maybe that's why you're here tonight," she said. "Maybe the waiting is over." I swallowed hard, unsure how to answer. Their voices, their confessions, their silences. They drew me in deeper than I expected. What began as polite small talk had unfolded into something raw and unguarded. And sitting there, with three women sharing their private truths, I felt an invisible thread weaving between us. Fragile but undeniable, tying me to them in ways I hadn't yet dared to name. The rain outside thickened, a steady patter that filled the spaces between our words. The room was warm, heavy with the faint scent of jasmine tea and something sweet still lingering from earlier. The conversation had shifted again. Lighter now, threads of humor woven through confessions. We laughed more easily, though beneath the laughter was a current that none of us seemed willing to name. It happened almost without me noticing. As I made some clumsy remark that sent them into a fit of laughter, the woman with the sweater reached across the small table to steady her teacup. Her hand brushed mine in passing, soft, warm, lingering for just a second longer than necessary. My pulse jumped, though I tried to keep my face calm. She didn't pull away immediately. Her fingers rested lightly against my knuckles before sliding back, her eyes catching mine with a small smile, as if she knew exactly what she'd done. Moments later, the woman with the sharp, pinned-up hair leaned toward me. "Your collar's turned," she murmured, her tone casual but her movements anything but. Her hand rose to adjust it, fingertips grazing the base of my neck. The touch was brief, but the heat of it stayed, sinking under my skin like an ember. I could feel her breath, close enough to stir the hair near my ear, before she eased back into her seat. I told myself I was imagining it. The way their touches held weight, the way silence always seemed to follow afterward, stretching like a drawn-out note. But then the quiet one, the one with calm, searching eyes, leaned forward suddenly, brushing at my sleeve. "There," she said softly. "You had something on you." Her fingers lingered a moment longer than the gesture required, her eyes meeting mine in the lamplight. She didn't smile this time. She just looked, as if daring me to notice what she had not said. Each touch was innocent enough on its own. A brush of fingers, a hand at my collar, fingertips grazing fabric. And yet, taken together, they carried a weight that grew heavier with every passing minute. My chest felt tight, though not in discomfort, more like anticipation, like standing on the edge of something you both want and fear at the same time. Their laughter resumed, but I could hear my heartbeat beneath it. My tea had long gone cold in my hands. I wasn't sure whether to set it down or hold it tighter, something to anchor me in the growing storm of sensation. When our knees touched beneath the low table, hers grazing mine by accident, or maybe not, I didn't move away. Neither did she. The night was still young, but already, the room was filled with more than words. The rain had softened into a misty drizzle outside, but inside, the air seemed thicker than ever. The living room no longer felt like just a space for books and tea. It felt like a circle had been drawn around us, invisible yet undeniable. The three women sat close, their attention fixed on me in a way that was both flattering and unnerving. It wasn't the kind of attention I was used to from people my age, casual, distracted, half-hearted. This was different. Their eyes stayed on me, weighing my answers, searching for truths I didn't know I was ready to give. It began with a simple question, asked by the woman with the sharp, watchful eyes. She tilted her head slightly, studying me like a puzzle. "What do you think love really is?" she asked, her voice steady low. For a moment I couldn't speak. Her words weren't casual. They landed with the weight of something practiced, maybe even rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for the right person to ask. My mouth went dry as I searched for an answer. The woman in the sweater leaned forward, her chin resting on her palm, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Do you believe love is about passion, or about choosing someone and staying, even when it's hard?" Her eyes softened, but there was sadness in them too, like she was asking herself as much as she was asking me. The quietest one, the one with calm eyes, shifted closer. Her knee brushed mine under the table, deliberate this time. "And," she whispered, almost to herself, "do you ever feel like love can come at the wrong time, but still be the right thing?" Their questions circled me like threads weaving a net. I felt caught but not trapped, more like they were pulling me toward something they hadn't yet named. I swallowed, my pulse quickening. "I don't think I know yet," I admitted. My voice sounded younger than I wanted it to. "But I think love is when someone makes you feel seen. Completely. Not for who you should be or who you used to be, just who you are right now." Silence fell again, the kind that pressed against my chest. When I looked up, their eyes were on me. Not with amusement, not with pity, but with something warmer, heavier. The woman with the sharp eyes leaned back, her lips curving in the faintest smile. "That's a very old answer," she said softly. For someone so young. The one in the sweater reached out, her fingers brushing the back of my hand. Or maybe, she murmured. It's exactly the answer we needed to hear. No one said it outright, but I felt it in the way they looked at me, in the pauses between words. The question hanging unspoken. What was happening between us? What were we allowing ourselves to feel? The room held its breath, and so did I. The questions had left the room heavy, and none of us seemed eager to break the silence that followed. Outside, the rain softened into a hush, the drops sliding down the window in uneven trails. The only sound inside was the faint tick of the clock on the wall, steady and insistent, as though reminding us that time was moving forward even while we sat so still. It was the woman in the sweater who spoke first. She let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than relief. You know, she said softly, sometimes I feel like I've disappeared, like the world doesn't see me anymore. She laughed once, but it was a fragile sound, her eyes glistening in the lamplight. When you're younger, people notice everything about you. Your smile, your voice, the way you walk into a room. But lately, it feels like I could vanish and no one would know. Her words struck me harder than I expected. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I saw her, completely, but my throat closed up before I could. The woman with the sharp, dark eyes leaned forward, her expression softer than it had been all evening. I know that feeling, she admitted. It's easier to become background, reliable, dependable, even invisible. People stop asking what you want. They just assume you've already had your turn. Her hand tightened slightly around the edge of her cup, as though holding herself together. The quiet one, the one with the searching gaze, reached out. She placed her hand gently on her friend's knee, a gesture filled with tenderness. I haven't been close to anyone in years, she confessed. Her voice was steady, but the tremor underneath was unmistakable. I forgot what it feels like, the warmth of someone's hand, the way silence changes when you're not alone. Sometimes I wonder if I waited too long, if I let the chance pass me by. The words hung there, fragile and raw, and I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't expected. Not just desire, but a deep ache, a need to protect them from the weight of their own doubts. I set my cup down, the porcelain clinking softly against the table. My voice felt small in the quiet, but I forced the words out anyway. I don't see you the way you see yourselves, I said, glancing at each of them in turn. I don't see women who are fading or invisible or too late. I see women who are alive, who make me feel like I've walked into something I didn't even know I was waiting for. The quiet one's eyes softened, her fingers brushing lightly against my forearm in gratitude. The woman in the sweater smiled through tears she didn't bother to hide. The sharp-eyed one simply held my gaze, her expression unreadable, but her lips curved just enough to let me know she'd heard me. In that moment, I felt the distance between us dissolve. We were no longer a young man and three older women separated by years. We were simply people laid bare in our need to be seen, to be held, to belong. And for the first time that night, I wasn't afraid to want it. The house felt different by then. Not simply quieter, but charged, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the weight of what had been spoken. The lamplight pooled gently across the floorboards, softening every line, every shadow. None of us moved quickly. None of us wanted to. At some point, one of them glanced at the clock and gave a rueful laugh. "We've kept you far too long," she said, though her voice carried no urgency. It was more a ritual of manners than a true suggestion. Still, the spell of the evening had to end sometime, and I knew it. I rose slowly, and they rose with me. It wasn't like the end of a typical gathering, with coats hastily thrown on and polite waves. No, this was deliberate. We lingered near the doorway, all of us reluctant to let the moment slip away. The woman in the sweater was the first to close the distance. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms lightly around my shoulders, her cheek brushing against mine. Her embrace was warm, steady, and it lasted just long enough for me to hear the faint rhythm of her breath before she let go. "Thank you," she whispered, and though she didn't explain what for, I understood. The one with the sharp eyes followed. She didn't embrace me at once. Instead, she looked up into my face for a long moment, her gaze unflinching. Then she placed her hand against the side of my cheek, her thumb brushing lightly at my jaw. It was such a small touch, but it steadied me, anchored me. Finally, she leaned forward and pressed a kiss to my cheek, brief but certain. "Don't forget what you said tonight," she murmured, and I nodded, my chest tightening. The quiet one approached last. She didn't reach for me immediately. Instead, she slipped a folded piece of paper into my jacket pocket, her hand lingering there for a second too long. Only then did she take my hand, squeezing it gently, her eyes holding mine with a look that needed no words. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Come back," she said. Not a request, more like a promise hanging in the air. When I finally stepped outside, the cool night air hit me, sharp after the warmth of the living room. The street was slick from rain, the pavement reflecting the glow of the street lamps. I stood for a moment, my pulse unsteady, my mind racing with everything that had just passed between us. Their voices lingered in my ears, their touches still alive on my skin. I started walking, but every step felt as though I carried something new inside me. Something fragile, daring, and alive. That night, I realized I hadn't simply attended a book club. I had stepped into a story that wasn't written yet, one that none of us had dared to name aloud. And as I walked into the night, I knew with a quiet certainty, the story wasn't over. It had only just begun.